Hi, my name is Jack, and for the assignment, I've decided to create 4 different lighting setups with inspiration from various shots from different films to test out the creative method behind them and hopefully use someday in my work in the future. Throughout all the lighting setups, I used a consecutive setting to help keep the lighting fair between each other. This was filmed on a Panasonic VariCam LT in 25 fps with a working t-stop of 2.8, a white balance of 3200 degree Kelvin with Panasonic V-Log done in ProRes 444 codec, and then Rec 709 LUT applied at the end. For my shots, I tried to have them all look and feel different to widen my setups. These are, in order shown in the beginning, Hereditary, Whiplash, The Conjuring 2 and Drive. As part of my preparation, I created a floor plan and shot design of each shot based on what and where I have access to do my shots. I also wanted to test out these shots on an app called Setalight before I cemented the floor plans in place, but unfortunately I had previously downloaded and used the free 2-week trial for an older project I was a part of. The first shot I did was one taken from a horror film called Hereditary that came out in 2018. Though the shot I am referencing doesn't exactly shout horror, I'd rather pick this as I like the look of it. For this, I was able to shoot my grandparents' house in a spare room they had, where I got my actor to be relaxing on a bed and then walk off. I used a 24mm lens for this as I am wanting to capture the entire room as a wide shot without distorting detail a smaller millimeter lens could do. My goal was to try to create a soft and early morning feel. I did this by having an ARRI 650 Plus Fresnel lamp outside the window to be my backlight, which managed to feed the cable through the window and into a plug socket behind the bed and out of sight with the help of a 16 amp extension lead. On the ARRI 650, I had half diffusion and full orange gel, and then angle looking down towards the wall behind my actor to reference an early morning sunlight. The curtains closed also added another layer of diffusion to what was already there and helped create the soft look. I did all my light readings on incident mode throughout the assignment, and for this light it read an overall stop of 4. I also needed a key light to help spread the light out onto my subject from inside the room, so I used a Velvet Mini in the centre of the room facing my subject's face. This was on 2500 degree Kelvin with an intensity of 3%. I decided in the moment to add a green scrim, or also known as a single scrim, in front of the Mini Velvet, which reduces half a stop of light to reduce the light a little bit more on my subject and stop some light bouncing from the wall behind her. This read at about 2.8. This didn't fully eliminate the bounce, but I didn't have much time to mess around with it as I had to wrap up and take the kit back to mine. Overall, I am happy with the way this shot was done and the focusing of it. Because it is only me doing these shots, I had this stationary, so once the focus was set using peaking from the monitor, I didn't need to touch it again for the take. But looking back on it while editing it, I wish I had booked out a reflector which could have helped me eliminate the subtle light bounce from the wall better. I think if it was also possible, I would have liked to add some light on the wall behind my subject to help break up the look of the shot, such as a window frame. For the second shot I did, I took reference from a scene in the 2015 film Whiplash, where the main protagonist, Andrew, is having a meal with his family. My goal was to create the warm tungsten house feeling that was shown in the scene and have it look like it was coming from a ceiling chandelier light. So I had my subject be sitting at a table and pretend to look relaxed and engaged in a conversation while also eating something. To begin with, I used a 35mm lens as I wanted this to be closer as the camera is almost opposite to the actor with eye level. I had the Amaran f22X set up to be my key light and placed high up at an angle looking down on my actor. This was to help represent the chandelier. However, I didn't want this to be hard lighting with a hard spot but rather soft, so the skin texture isn't gone. I adjusted the intensity to about 2% and applied the soft diffusion supplied with the Amaran, and then the honeycomb grid to help shape and soften the light. My goal was to have the scene feel warmer than the previous shot, so I wanted the light to be lower Kelvin, but the lowest Kelvin it could do was 2700 on CCT mode. So I applied an orange gel over the light to create a warmer look. To help reduce the amount of light coming out without losing the intensity, I used the green single scrim again to remove half a stop of light. This, by the end of it, measured at about 1.4 in incident mode. The second light I used was a Velvet panel light, as this had a wider horizontal spread with barn doors compared to the Velvet Mini. I had this placed at eye level and at about a 30-degree angle from where the actor's face is. I also applied a full orange gel over this too on a 2700 degree Kelvin at an intensity of 3%, so it's the same as the Amaran. My goal for this light is that it is my fill light and would eliminate the shadow from my actor on the wall, but would also help to light the left side of her face with the Amaran while leaving the right hand side of her face darker and unlit to have the contrast of the shadows. This was read at about 1 on incident mode. In future, if I was to do this shot again, I would add a small light to the right hand side of my actor's face, just so the shadows are not completely blown out, as I feel that side is a bit too dark for what I originally wanted. But I also think I would have made the lighting slightly intensified to about 5% on the Amaran and 4% on the Velvet panel to help bring the shadows out more and not look as dark. Other than that, I think I conveyed my goal well with wanting it warm and soft. My third shot I did was inspired by a similar shot in the 2013 film Conjuring 2, where there's a scene of a boy looking out the window in his kitchen at night with a soft baby blue moon glow coming through. This is the opposite to the previous two types of shots I've done, where I wanted it really dark but the moonlight to be really prominent. For this, my goal was to have the shot feel cold and late at night. I used 24mm lens for this as a mid shot, with a lot of the scene being drawn out by the darks and the shadows. The first light I used, which was my key light, is the ARRI 650 again. I placed this outside with half diffusion to help not make the light as hard, and a moonlight blue gel to bring out the nighttime look. I also increased the height of the low boy it was on, so I could angle it more downwards and have the window frame bounce off the wall in the kitchen. As the window is in shot for this, I can't run the cable through it, so I connected the cable to a plug socket in my outdoor bar, which I ran with the 16 amp extension cord, where it was safe from any outdoor elements such as rain. I also placed a black flag up to the left side of the light to help stop the light spilling across the window and have it more concentrated in one place. This measured at about 1.4 on incident mode. The second light I used was the Mini Velvet again. This was my fill light to help cast some light onto the left side of my actor's face and not have it all be dark. For this I used half white diffusion with a steel blue gel on 6500 Kelvin and 100% intensity. But instead of angling the light on my actor, which would have resulted in hard light, I flipped it in the opposite direction and angled it more towards the ceiling, so the light could bounce off the room and onto my actor. This resulted in a softer look from the light, which worked a lot better than my original plan, which was to have it at a lower intensity and directly on my actor. This measured at about 0.5 on incident mode. Overall, this is probably one of my favourite shots out of the four that I did, as I really like the contrast of the darks and the blues, which I deem this to be a success. If I was to do this again, however, I think I would add an extra light inside the kitchen and be placed behind the actor as a backlight with low intensity, as well as flags to avoid light spill onto the rest of the scene. This would help the actor and the kitchen be brought out better, so the actor is more distinguished in the room. And finally, the last lighting setup. This was probably the trickier lighting setup to do, as this was all outside and the weather and time constraints were working against us. This is because on the day of the filming, it was intermittently raining and very windy. To add to the unfortunate events of being outdoors, this meant I was unable to have time to adjust the lighting much to try to get done before the weather got worse. My goal for this was to create a similar effect of a hard light from the street light shine onto the driver, with the rest of the actor having a darker shadow. I did this on a 50mm lens, as I wanted it to feel tighter with the space of the car. For this setup, I used 3 different lights. My first light was supposed to represent the street light as my backlight, the Velvet panel light. I had this at a 2700 degree Kelvin with intensity of 29% and a full orange gel. As of location access, and a lot of streets near me not being tungsten bulbs anymore, I improvised and used my driveway, which also helped with kit transport staying at one location. So I placed this light above my car at the back and tilted downwards to create the illusion, which was also similar to what I did in my dining table shot. I also decided to add a black flag to the right of the light to stop any light spilling over and to be more concentrated to the back of my active's head. This light read at about 2.8 on instant mode. As I just mentioned, I placed a black flag to avoid light spillage. I also used a velvet mini light on the other side of this flag to help reinforce the backlight and have it at a lower intensity, to try to fill out the head shape and to separate the head from the background. This was done at the same degree Kelvin of 2700, but at an intensity of 8%. I didn't decide to place a gel over this, however, as I didn't want this light to be as orange as the velvet panel, as it was acting more as a backlight. This light also read at about 2.8 on instant mode. Originally on my floor plan, I had a mini velvet next to the camera facing my actor to be my key light, but I decided a mini Roscoe Dash pocket light would be better, and I had it placed inside the car to help the light fill the room better. Another idea was to have it facing the ceiling of the car, but I thought that was too obvious on the camera and create too much shadow for my actor, so I resorted back to having it face my actor. This was on CCT mode on 3200 degree Kelvin and an intensity of 7% and measured 0.5 on instant mode. Overall with the shot, I'm split between my thoughts on it. I think I conveyed the idea well enough, it works, but I think I can do better if I had more time and less issues with the weather. If I could do it again, then I would increase the intensity of the Roscoe light inside the car, so it helped brings out the dark a bit more across my actor's face. But I would also make it more of a colder colour temperature, so the face doesn't seem as red. For the entire lighting portfolio, I would deem this to be a success, with my ideas and faithful to the references. I believe I made a good attempt with the references well from the source, and also managed to do lighting setups that I have never done before. I hope to be able to use these lighting setups in the future similarly with my creative work after university. To avoid mistakes made on set, I will try to source an actor who has better availability, which would then let me have an extra day to fall back onto if needed. But more importantly, to not rely on the monitor as much for the colour and shadows, as when I placed the log footage into DaVinci, it was a lot darker than it was on set. In a professional standard, time is very important, so instead of having ideas on the day, I will try to avoid doing that and rather try some before the shoot, such as Satellite, which would be a full license and not a trial version. If I did these exact lighting shots again, I would definitely make them a bit brighter, as that seemed to be the common theme among all the shots, being slightly darker than I originally wanted.